Hey, everybody. Welcome out to the AI Think Tank podcast. Today, our guest is Laura Miller of NextGen Ethics, an AI consultancy dedicated to keeping ethics at the forefront of AI lifecycle. Laura is a global keynote speaker, an author, a founder, and a product visionary. You're also a philosopher and an award winner, and you do a lot in the world of ethics. And so we have a lot to talk about today. And there's been a lot of things going on this summer and a lot of, progress on a lot of fronts. So welcome to the show. And how's it going?
Well, thank you for having me here. It's a very happy, busy Saturday here as we get ready to transition from summer quickly into fall. So we're looking forward to all things pumpkin, I think. Not sure about a latte, but possibly on the list. I tend to be more of a cinnamon girl.
Yeah.
So give me a cinnamon dolce latte anytime, and I'm pretty much there.
Yeah. You fit it in
So,
Seattle. Yeah, definitely.
oh, yes, definitely.
Awesome. Yeah. So tell us about some of your and you're not just a founder, but you've been involved with a few companies here. Can you tell us about your involvement in your finalist startup competitions and some other things that you've been doing?
Sure. Right now, NextGen Ethics, my company, is working and we're developing a
Uh,
solution for the problem of harmful media or harmful content across social media.
mhm,
So, what we're looking to do is personalize content moderation, no longer waiting for tech companies to come in with a magic solution that wouldn't
mhm,
pay them to implement, and instead create one of our own, guided by, created by, supported by, used by, well, those members of social media. I intentionally avoid using the word users where I can because
mhm,
it has so many heavy laden kind of connotations to it, and with addiction being one of the problems,
mhm,
especially for Gen Z and their mental health concerns. I don't think the word users is particularly helpful. So,
mhm,
as mentioned, we did make it to the semifinalists in the Startup World Cup this year, as
mhm.
well as a local competition and Arch grants. And we were very, very pleased to do so. As you might imagine, I am not the stereotypical founder. I probably don't do tech very well, but
Mhm.
it's about the idea, it's about the solution, it's about what you can contribute and what you can give back. Technology can do amazing things in our world. I am certainly not a person who is anti-tech, but I would say I'm a tech realist. I know exactly the not good it can do, along with its potential for the good that it can do. So,
Mhm.
what better way to demonstrate that than to have a product dedicated to doing a good that we
Right.
desperately need in this world? Gen Z makes up almost half of the global population, and they're struggling through one of the greatest mental health crises and epidemics that we've seen. It's time to do something, and waiting for government and regulation, as we've seen with AI, could take some time.
Mhm.
And business and industry isn't always so inclined to give us the things that we need if they haven't found a solution that pays them to do so. Good
Mhm.
news is I'm not shackled by any of that. So I just do me.
That's
So
right.
been up to
Wow.
part of what we've been up to.
Yeah. So when did you start Next Gen Ethics? What?
Well, NextGen Ethics has kind of been, I guess it's been underground for a while. I
Mhm.
officially finalized the paperwork a little bit more than a year ago.
Mhm.
So it's new, but it's certainly not new to me. As a matter of fact, I only officially gave it a name because I had so many requests that it felt like I should give it a name.
That's
Um,
great.
so it's a lovely problem to have when you're fielding request after request after request, and you're like, I should put a brand to this and do something with it, and
Mhm.
then see what
Right.
else I can do with it now that I have a brand.
Uh-huh.
But I've been doing ethics probably since I was 12 and gave a sermon in church
Uh-huh.
to the entire congregation about why they, as the good people, the people who go to church, the people who are supposed to do good in the world, why are they running around with their children and trying to hide them from the homeless people, and watch
Mhm.
as their children watch them refuse to help them or refuse to give
Right.
them money or tell them to stay
Uh-huh.
away from them. So I've
Uh-huh.
been tackling those problems since before I was a teenager, and well, I'm a long way from that right now.
Mhm.
It just, I don't know, I think I'm just born this way. It's been what I've always done. It's always been the kinds of things that I've paid attention to, not
Mhm.
just what is happening, but why is it happening and could it be different?
Yes. Yeah.
And what kind of questions would we have to ask to make a difference?
Mhm.
Has been something I've been practicing for decades.
You're a helper. you're just a helper like that, and you want to make things better. That's amazing.
where I can.
Yeah,
Every chance
exactly.
I get. I usually figure if something finds its way
Mm.
in front of me or, quote unquote, on my plate, that I found it for a reason. So there must be something I'm supposed to do with it. I don't
Yeah.
believe that things just randomly show up and you're meant to ignore
Hmm.
them. And
That's
not
right.
everything is something you can jump on at the moment. You should definitely
Uh-huh.
store that away for later because it's going to
Right.
find you again.
Uh-huh. Well, you have a lot of case studies up here. You've seen a lot, related to this. So there's a lot of angles to come at these things from, and a lot of ways to deploy that. And I have seen a lot this year, and been really just taken back by the overwhelming support for, the grassroots end of things in terms of our rights and our data ownership, provenance, agency of what we own and who we
Yeah.
are. There's a lot to it. And it wasn't easy 10 years ago. It wasn't easy. It was a little easier maybe 10 years before that, but still, it's just a growing, the concern grows, the more. It's not even about being interconnected. It's about the nature of what we have now in front of us, the ability to do so much so quickly, um, and for very cheap, depending. And that's, on the security end of things, we have to really work extra hard to keep up,
Yes.
and to protect systems. And likewise for society, and likewise for those who really need that protection the most. And then everyone else, I mean, we all deserve that base level. Um, but there are a lot of pitfalls in this, and there are a lot of challenges. But amongst all these things, where do you find what you're doing gaining some of the footing the most quickly? What's really working right now, you think, for what you're going for?
Um, One of the things that, I mean, we're at a huge moment in AI right now on education. We just are, But what's interesting is the talk about education gives me pause. Not because we don't need it, we absolutely do, but it seems to be constantly this conversation that the public needs educated on this stuff.
Hmm.
I think that the need for education goes far deeper. I think that developers need to also focus on remembering that this isn't software they're developing anymore. It's not, we push an update, and as long as we work the kinks out, people learn the new shortcut keys, we're off into the races. This stuff has a living, breathing life, even
Hmm.
after you ship it out the door. And with that comes obligations for you as the one who made it to ship it out the door. So you need to have a working relationship with those that you give it to, like the deployers, as well as the greater public who's going to be influenced by the choices that AI makes.
Yeah.
Similarly, deployers get sandwiched between developers and the everyday people impacted by the technology. And they need to have strong relationships both with their clients and customers and the public, as well as with the deployers that they received or had purchased from or procured the AI from, similarly, if they're the one developing it. And
Mhm.
again, the public, the everyday, user of this technology, there's that word I don't like. Um, each of them need to have a relationship and understand the role of development and the role of deployment in this process in getting this AI technology into the world. We can no longer build in our basement or garage, open up the door, check it out the window or the door, close the window and the door, go back down to our basement and work on developing the next thing. It's
Mhm.
different for everyone. This isn't just an innovation for everyone outside of tech, but those inside of tech now carry different duties and obligations they haven't had to carry before, and a different level of understanding that needs to be shared that they haven't been obligated to tackle before. So when
Mhm.
I talk about building relationships, I talk about them as a three-part
Mhm.
situation, which is we don't just need education on this is what the AI can do, although that's helpful. Hint, math seems to be getting better at. Also, hint seems to be getting better at coding. Also, hint, not good at life choices or anything that has significant impact.
Yeah.
But that along with that education, we need to figure out how to build those relationships as part of that education
Right.
because we have to shift those mindsets in each of those roles
Mhm.
to be in a supportive, interconnected relationship where previously they've been in silos.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And that is the big thing right now, is to take those silos and make them accessible to those outside of it. And
Yes.
this is a lot like what we've seen with AI in education. And I know we have a few people out in the audience today who know this very well, but the bridge between the teacher and the student and the parent is, it's all equally as important. I mean, it's all really about the student learning, but to do that, it takes the support network, that scaffolding and that communication, and the same way it would take to implement anything new across the board. Here in America, we had a toss up of people saying, "Oh, you can't use AI in school," and people like enforcing using it, and maybe not enforcing it so much as bringing it in and just allowing it to be used. And the same goes for workplaces, but more than not, it's been a special Swiss Army knife for people, an extra tool that they have to help them personally boost whatever it is they're doing in the moment. And that's amazing. That's definitely the calculator in the pocket we all need right now in this modern time. But in terms of large scale deployment, there are a lot of questions and a lot of practices that are, being looked at and explored. A lot of things related to accessibility of not just data, but between different cultures and in the same region. In Canada, this is true as well. There's a large degree of languages in one area that are vastly different. In America, you have dialects, even if it's the same language. If you're in Louisiana, guess what? It's going to be a little different. I'm from Alabama. I'm from Mobile. I understand this from growing up in the South. You could have
I'm a Jersey girl,
you could
so
have
I
three
grew up in
brothers.
Jersey.
Oh, okay,
I grew
yeah,
up in Jersey.
uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, East Coast has it too. So anyways, it is a challenge in some respects, but a new challenge for pretty much everybody in the other, which is happening so fast and we all have to
And
keep
let's
up
not
with
forget the
this in a
people who
way.
are left behind, the people who don't
Right.
have internet, the people who don't have a connection,
Mhm.
the people who aren't able to access this technology and yet are going to exist in a world competing with people who do.
Right.
I mean, there are significant challenges across the board, and also our impact of wanting this technology on cultures, indigenous persons, people in other places who, as has historically been the case, pay the price for innovations, whether
Yeah.
it's through us using their water to cool our data centers,
Hmm.
or whether it's us using their soil or their oceans off their coast so we can stick data centers in them. Yes, we are putting them beneath ground. There's a recent article about putting data centers in outer space. We've already tested that.
Hmm.
Um, there's a tremendous impact on resources. There's a tremendous impact on people. There's a tremendous impact on equality, on equity, on impact of decisions and choice making. There's bias in data sets. There's bias in ourselves, bias in the people who create the things. There's bias in me, and I'm an ethicist trying to identify it
Hmm.
and hold myself in check.
Right.
Ultimately, and this is where it gets really twisted and fascinating, is every single one of the sustainable development goals that we're supposed to achieve by 2030, we are on track to miss. And
Yeah.
AI has impacts across all of them.
Hmm. That's
At
right.
some point, as a society and as a culture, we have to figure out how to do ethics.
Mhm.
Laws are the bare minimum. They tell you when you can and cannot be sued, when you have the right to have an access to a judge or a
Mhm.
jury of your peers. It
Mhm.
can't tell you what's right, it tells you what's legal. But at some
Mhm.
point, our world is going to hit the crisis point where we're going to have to figure out what the right thing is to do, what the good thing is to do. We have to figure
Mhm.
out ethics. That's how we'll reach the sustainable development goals. And if we can reach the sustainable development goals, means we'll also be in a position or have been in a position or have already tackled the challenges that AI are presenting. Our
Mhm.
problems are morphing into whichever area they happen to show up in.
Yes.
Problems themselves
Yes.
are the
Mhm.
same. It's just a matter of where they're appearing now. And
Mhm.
now they're appearing in our technology, which can reach all the way around the world in milliseconds and have an impact.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Very
huge,
quickly.
huge things going
Mhm.
on in ethics.
Mhm. That's right. And an imbalance of that resource, like you said. I mean, it's easy to prescribe something that's just readily available to you in your area. On the West Coast, we have so much of this technology and infrastructure. It's easy. And to say that to someone in a different area, it's not going to be the same. Alabama's different, I could
That's
there,
St. Louis.
yeah, exactly. But now there's, we are all interconnected through the internet, and it depends on how good your connection is, really. And then if you can afford that compute somewhere, and there are a lot of us and at least my team, we run local AI on our home systems for free and use our home compute to do things like that. But we do this for testing and we do this for, personal usage as well. But I have to try everything, but I get to try everything.
Yeah.
Not everybody gets to try everything. And it is just because something might be free to sign up for a free account, you might not have a good connection.
Yeah.
And some things don't work unless you have a consistent connection. You might have a security issue or whatever. I've seen
A
it.
good device that can handle it.
Right. So, in this, a lot of what I experienced seeing was in the data sets and giving people the empowerment to include their culture into the data sets, to be the ones who transcribe it, who are the ones that truly write and record their own history into it. And that legacy, that's important. It's hard to do that from the outside. And if that's your second language, it's not the easiest thing. And so even then within that, you have multilingual barriers, you have a lot of these models can speak a lot of different languages, but it's not all 100%. Or even close to 90 in some cases, it could be pretty far off. But on the large, there's a certain standard baseline that we've reached with a lot of translation tools and things out there, but there's still vast disparities. And when it matters, even if you're using English and it's your native language and you're talking to the AI, it's meant to sound convincing. Okay. It is meant to seem like it knows what it's talking about. Yeah. I gave it a list of 80 employees and they had names and emails. We did this as a test in one of our MIT think tanks a long time ago. And we started talking to the document. Well, how many employees are there? 79. Are you sure? Yes. Well, I counted 80. Oh, I'm sorry. You're correct. I made a mistake. It's meant to sound,
Oh yeah.
convincing the whole
I
time.
said
So,
all bullet points and it gives
yeah.
you 4, but you knew there
Right.
were 12. And you're like, what happened to the other 8? And they're like, oh, my bad. I'm like, wait a
Yeah.
minute.
Yeah.
And that should be something. It can't count words.
Yeah, right. It's easier if you just spell the words out in English. Anyway, but it's not meant for that. And it's really important that we understand the limitations of some of these tools, or at least their nature, that
Absolutely.
which will change, which
Yes.
is growing. But on the large, imagine being English is your second language and it sounds convincing.
Oh
And
yeah.
there's so many little things to read into you might miss. Likewise,
Mhm.
using a different language and
We
it
run
was,
into that even when it gives you news stories back that don't exist, but sound
yes.
convincing. I mean, there was a law school
Uh-huh.
professor who was accused by an AI sexual assault that never happened. You know what
Right.
he found out, even being an attorney?
Hmm.
He had no recourse either
Wow.
because it was just a mistake.
Hmm.
Because, to a certain extent, in some instances, because, it's part of philosophy program, you have to study logic, Boolean logic. You have to make words make sense the way math makes numbers make sense. So
Hmm.
it's next level twisted. But in some instances, you could say a mistake was simply either a mistake or not a mistake, right? And
Hmm.
we understand what that means, and we can do that. But when you have lived experience in the world, when you've actually lived in this world and experienced consequences, you understand not all mistakes are equal.
Hmm.
And that's a nuance that AI and technology doesn't have access to. It never gets to feel the consequences of a suggestion. It
Hmm.
never has anyone other than say, no, try again, really be unhappy with it or freeze it out, or those things that are available to us as recompense when things go wrong. AI can't do that.
No.
It just, so its understanding of the things that it suggests
Hmm.
are very different, whether it's rock and glue on pizza, or whether or not it's telling a 13-year-old how to set the mood with a 30-year-old.
Right.
It doesn't have a context.
And no, it doesn't.
But
It's
we also have to understand the data sets that went into this. And since the goal was to converse, it was merely to talk, not to talk accurately, but to
Mhm.
talk. And
Yeah.
it does talk well. It can cut sentences. It can correct your commas if you want to. I'm kind of bad at commas. It has fun with commas. Life is good.
Mhm.
But it was trained on regular, everyday conversations. So why, if you ask it a question on, something like a word problem, it doesn't do well? Why? Because collectively we don't do well on word problems.
Mhm.
It has a lot of, and many of the same challenges that we do,
Mhm.
because it was trained to talk. It's now trying to learn or be trained to do some of these other things. So, they'll make a big deal. They'll be like, we trained it on, volumes of academic papers. You know what the
Mhm.
point of academic papers are? To
Mhm.
disagree with the other academic.
Mhm.
So how's it ever going to get to a definitive answer when all
Uh-huh.
the data conflicts?
Right. If even in a perfect, well, okay, hypothetically, let's say we supplied a near perfect data sets, completely
Right.
representational of everything. It's still a guessing machine and it's not reasoning. I think that's the bottom line is until that changes, which we'll see, this is all built in the under with the idea that these neural networks are like ours, okay, and then
Mhm.
take similar routes. But it is a guessing machine and it does a great job of guessing. And it's just like, imagine someone writing prescriptions when everything just really seems like that's the situation for whatever's wrong with their ailment, or whatever their ailment is. But,
Mhm.
and they're statistically 85%, 90% right. But because
Yeah.
what they don't do isn't detrimental, like someone might be sick for longer, but they would never have any kind of consequences. So even in real life, people go about doing things like this haphazardly to some degree or not. Some people have a day, whatever. And I'm not talking about any groups or people on the large. It's just there are bad actors out there who
Yeah, they are. And they're
and
going to do what they do.
but there's also the more common simple mistake that we are all susceptible to, no matter what. That humbling mistake, no matter how much or think it doesn't matter. Our we are biased on our peripheral inputs. So therein lies that it's not reasoning yet the same way. It'll seem like it's reasoning, and it might tell you that it is, or it might tell you that it isn't. Is it lying? It can't lie because it can't really tell you anything. It's just
Right.
reporting words that are most likely to be next in a sequence. And it's just so amazing that we fall for it.
Yeah.
And it seems real. It's such a magic thing. But it's not even a hand in a puppet though.
Yeah.
It's just a puppet with a machine on it. And
Yeah.
that's it. So is it like our hand? Sure. But
Yeah.
until it meets all those there's a lot of conditions to meet before we have this robust system to worry about. AGI. We're not, we there have been a lot of great science fiction movies to get us worked up and excited for things like this. But on the level, I mean, what we're talking about right now is the everyday effect, the common mistake, the mistake in learning. One of the things I like about AI is to rephrase a question. It's something I might not get technically. I study all the time and I'm taking all these different
Right.
courses for different things that I'm interested in or want to do or need to do. And if there's something that's tricky, I put the question in and say, provide this in some different ways, and then go, oh, okay, great. And then figure out why I didn't understand. It's not important. It's not just important to understand the answer. It's important to understand why you didn't get it to begin with and to really put that in place and build a step to grow on. So I find it to be a quick and indispensable tool in that regard. But even then, I have to check that against something else. Is that correct? And so in life, we're left with that same thing.
Right.
So you kind of create equity there in the way you operate and level that playing field and say, okay, I'm still going to verify this,
Well, yeah.
depending on what it is. If it's a recipe, maybe it doesn't matter. If you're baking something, it might really matter. Oh, well, does that work? And so it helps to understand the subject. Anyways, um, but yeah, loud and clear. There's a great need for exactly what you're aiming to provide, especially NextGen Ethics. I mean, there any companies that you're working with directly to formulate something new and implement some potential, services?
Well, right now, so far as implementing services, a lot of them are bringing me in for education. They
Yeah.
are. They're trying to, but also not just education, like education on how it works, but also like hands-on, type in this prompt, what do you get? How do
Mm-hmm.
you know if that's a good prompt? How do you know if it's not? There is a huge tech gap right now, which is why AI came at such an opportune and inopportune moment both.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we don't even necessarily have the skills in tech. Tech companies are struggling to find people with the skills for this, let alone everyday businesses that are trying to find skills for this. So a
Right.
lot of my work right now is involving talks explaining what needs to be done on a business side in order to wield this technology. And it's a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of businesses have not considered the fact that, well, they might have to go agile or something similar too, but waterfall is not going to work with AI. And a lot of people are like, well, we'll just build it into our existing systems. Your
Mm,
existing systems aren't designed to function the way that AI does and can't quite get you there. So there's a whole lot in change management that needs to happen,
mhm.
which is supportive of AI,
Right.
along with the education piece before anyone even gets their hands on technology.
Mm,
But good news, an overwhelming number of employees are using AI without permission for
yeah.
their work
Mhm.
anyway. And the funny thing is, some businesses think, well, if I don't know, then it's not my problem.
Mhm.
Others are like, how do we shut it down completely? And there's really no way to shut it down completely.
Mhm. No, you can't.
So I mean, you can block certain websites and you can do that kind of stuff, but they can pull out their own laptop and ask you the question about the work they're doing for you.
Mhm.
So there are a whole bunch of risks that we're talking about that are almost like the precursor to the next step. I really think in the next 6 months, we'll start moving into more people actually choosing tools, trying to figure out what to do, et cetera. Big holdup is, where's the ROI in this?
Yeah.
Do I want to spend X amount of dollars for you to write me a better email?
Right.
Like where is the return on investment? And to be honest with you, even investors in these AI companies, the larger ones like OpenAI, Microsoft, et cetera,
Mhm.
even they
Mhm.
want to know where the ROI is.
That's right.
So, like, how is my company going to make money off of this, or at least get a return for our investment so we break even? But who wants to break even? So,
Mhm.
like, do I give it to HR? Well, I believe it was New York who's passed a law that said, well, not so fast, HR. There's some
Right.
things we can't do with this. And
Mhm.
it's like, okay, well, okay, it can help with email, so maybe it can help with some customer facing. Then we had Canada's chat bot. I believe it was Canadian Airlines, not Air Canada.
Oh yeah, that
Does
debacle.
that?
Mm.
Yeah, and their chatbot told the client that a policy existed that didn't. And then they didn't want to honor what the chatbot had said. Actually took it to court, represented themselves.
Yeah, that's right.
And the person who bought the ticket, who was entitled to a refund, actually is the one who won. It's far more complicated than that, though, because the airline actually argued that the chatbot was a separate entity and that they didn't have to be responsible for it.
Mhm.
So again, companies are like, okay, so like, do chatbots always work? Like, where am I actually gonna put this to use? It's almost like I get more buy-in as a company by saying I have it than actually doing things with it,
Mhm. Mhm.
because I've got to figure out what to do with it. Where
Yeah.
I know that there's a return on investment, where I know that it's worth the extra time, money,
Mhm.
even payroll, to have the right people in place and all of that kind of stuff. Yes, it's great, but what am I supposed to do with it? It's a
Yeah.
huge question that even tech companies are having a hard time answering. Individual companies are like, you can use my AI for this, but
Mhm.
that's very niche.
Yeah, that's right.
So where is the AI, the ROI, and how do I chase that? And how do I find a solid use case for
Mhm.
this?
Right. Right.
Those are kind of the questions that are hitting some of the stumbling blocks as businesses look at this and say, oh my God, AI is here. And we've always known it because it's been in chatbots and stuff, but
Mhm.
it's known in a different way now.
Yeah.
The second question is, what do I do with it?
Uh-huh.
And that one's harder to answer.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and for some it's something they've been waiting on. For others, it's just an option that may or may not apply. And if you, depending on what you're working with, you don't want all of your employees using OpenAI's ChatGPT with, important data that needs to be private because they will train their models on it. If you use it, if you're using it personally, if you use their API, it won't train their models, but it's still being snooped. It's
Right.
not safe. It's another endpoint exposed. The
Oh, yeah.
company that would benefit the most would get a large savings, to have their own internal AI deployments. They would save the most, because they would be taking advantage of the gains on it. What you
Right,
couldn't do before is available. We can do something revolutionary now. We can
right.
provide a new service. We can create a new stream. There's so many things that you could do at that point. It's not about, oh, even if you had the money to pay someone to do it, this thing could do something a person can't do a certain way. And that's just goes the same with any script or program out there. Okay. But in the way it's able to interact and commingle, makes a difference, So,
But think about small businesses. They're not adept at doing that kind of stuff. They don't
mhm.
have an internal development team.
No, they
So,
don't.
so what are people like small businesses supposed to do with it?
Right.
They have to find a product that somebody's already marketed, that they've
Uh-huh.
already created to try to bring in-house to do something with it. And then
Hmm.
they have to chase ROI and hope that the use case that they brought it in for can yield some ROI. And to be honest with you, that they can track it so they know what they did. A
Right.
lot of
Mhm.
people can get ROI from AI, but don't know how to track it to find it. They say
Yeah.
that about ethics as well.
Uh-huh. Yeah. You can't manage what you can't measure. It can be tricky to measure some of those things and then find the gains. I mean, the way I look at it is it needs to be obvious what benefits there are. If there's no obvious benefit, like, wow, we can do this, that, and the other, then there's probably not a lot there. There could be, but on the large, statistically, probably not a lot there. And for other things, it makes things possible. It wasn't possible before. And then it's revolutionary. It's a huge deal. I know that I have things that I want to build that go into different platforms that would revolutionize, live broadcast. And it's great. I have all these great ideas. I know it would work, but it's a niche. These things
Mhm.
are not without their built-in stakeholders, people who are into that, would use that. So a lot of great ideas out there. I've seen so many, but like you said, how do you use it? Well, if you don't need it, you don't. Just don't
Like
do
I
it.
said, I think entrepreneurs
Yeah.
are, entrepreneurs especially have found many uses for it. I mean,
Mhm.
for the skill sets that you don't have, help me with my marketing, help me with my positioning, help me figure out mission and vision
Oh,
statements,
sure.
look
Hmm.
at some of my, LinkedIn posts and tell me what you see. What do you think my pillars of my organization are?
Uh-huh.
You can use it for those kinds of things, and that's great. And the larger organizations, the Microsofts and the big caps, Fortune 100 to 500, they already have departments who are already looking to capitalize on it. The
Oh, yeah.
challenge is, and where it gets really twisted, is that the mid-sized companies and the small businesses, the
Mhm.
ones that are bigger than one,
Yeah.
that aren't Fortune, 500,
Hmm.
it's a large swath of businesses here, especially in the United States, but I would say even around the world. And it's much harder for them to get value out of it than almost anybody else.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, because you're almost forced to keep up. The way I see it, in living in a big city here in Seattle, is you have food delivery services. All right,
Okay.
you have DoorDash. You have
Uber
Uber
Eats, yeah.
Eats. You
Mhm.
have, I think Lyft even picks up food. There's a lot of things, but what happens is you have the restaurant that you like, and all of a sudden it becomes modernized, and they're doing deliveries. Okay, here comes somebody. But then they only take certain ones, and then eventually they're pressured into taking other ones. Like, oh, now we do DoorDash. Okay, but it's one more thing for them to have to keep up with. And if you're a SMB, depending on how small you are, really, it's like you're drowning in things that everybody else is doing, and you're having to just keep up. You know what I mean? Like they have to stay modern, or they're not getting as many orders.
But you got
And
to be
that's
careful too, because you don't want to turn into Starbucks, who modernized everything, figured out how to get mobile orders, into the
Mhm.
stores and churn and burn. But in doing so, they blew their brand.
Yeah.
And now they have a new CEO who's trying to bring the brand back as a coffee shop you want to hang out at versus the coffee shop you want to drive through. And many
Mm.
people don't want to spend that kind of money to drive through it because there's competitors that are there for less. So what I
Yeah.
think is interesting is for some, there will be a niche in not modernizing,
Yes.
be a niche
Yes.
in
Mhm.
knowing that every time I reach out to these people, I get a person, not an automated bot that sounds like a person.
Mhm.
So I think we need to start really paying attention to who do we want to be as businesses and organizations?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? What does it look like? And it doesn't necessitate this. And it doesn't mean people shouldn't still explore it. If you change jobs, you're going to be in a whole new place. You got to know what's going on. But at the same time, for a business strategy, this has to be intentional. It
Mm-hmm.
cannot just
Yeah.
be ride the wave of everyone else,
No,
because
not at
everyone
all.
else is not on your same wave.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And we have to recognize that as businesses and organizations, not everyone is going to be positioned to jump on this AI wave and, ride the gravy train somewhere. That's not true, and it shouldn't be true for
Mm-hmm.
everyone. You really have to sit down and go, what part of my job am I doing where talking to a computer would help me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And you
Right.
might not come up with a whole lot at first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's high value ROI kind of task. They seem to be the more lower tasks.
Mm-hmm.
Get me through my emails faster so I can think.
That's
Those kind of
important.
things.
Yeah. That's the life-saving, quality creating type of technology you want. You want it to be like that. Like, get me to the point of understanding where I can, it's just like reframing a question a few times until you get it and understand why you
Yes.
didn't get it and understand why you do get it. And there's your quality, there's your learning, there's the substance. Other than
Yes.
that, it's just it's like a fad. It's like, oh, you won't be able to have a calculator everywhere you go. Huh, okay. Oh, the internet, what's that? What's email? I remember seeing all the old news reels of people like an A with a circle around it. Email, what is email? And then everything is such a trend, the motor vehicle, like it's the same thing over and over again, and then, but now it's just so pervasive and it's so intermediate, it's so rooted into things so much quicker than the, other things have ever done. And in the past few years, all this technology, I think, started around the 30s and 40s with a perceptron and handwritten numbers being recognized as actual digital characters as what they are. And now here we're talking to computers and getting them to program for us, and that's not perfect either. And if
Yeah.
you don't
It
understand what you're
doesn't
doing,
doesn't
you
get code perfect either. You're
yeah,
right.
yeah, that's right. And I have experienced that pain firsthand for a while now, and so yeah, and if you're a subject matter expert, this is your time to shine. Humans in the
Yeah.
loop are what make all this come together a lot better. I know that we talked about this the other day, in fact, about how, you need more people involved and a lot more hand holding with the technology in that direction where we are training it better. Uh,
Absolutely.
but there are large demands right now. I think in the SMB, realm and up, you have everybody wanting to talk with their files and wanting to have let's take this corpus of work and see if we can't make some more value out of it and do that.
Right.
And there are so many pitfalls in just doing that that it's scary because you could say, oh, here's this long document and it's a story. Let's say you wrote a journal, okay, and it missed the very end, and it wrote a whole review on what you did, and you wouldn't quite notice that it missed something, but it could have
Right.
impacted the whole gist would have changed. The whole output would have been, could have been very different depending.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a lot to look at there. Uh,
Definitely.
but so it's not some magic answer. It's got some serious limits, and even the best of the best have issues with it. And it's an art and not a science right now.
No,
It's
it is.
built on the science for sure, but it itself is still a growing
I was
art.
going to say, right now, it's really going to come down to you and what you can pull from it.
Hmm.
And that hinges on, again, like you were talking about, being a subject matter expert. That's why even when I talk to businesses and industries, I was like, they're like, great, who can I replace with this? I'm like, no one. And they're like,
Mm-mm.
what do you mean? And I was like, you need people who know whether or not that answer is a quality answer. You
Hmm.
need to have people who know and understand the implications of enacting an answer that it gives you. If you get rid of the people who know those answers to replace it with a technology that doesn't,
Right. Yeah, the tool
then
doesn't
you
replace
do
the
it.
worker. Yeah, it's like someone using a hand crank drill versus an electric drill. You're replacing the drill, not the worker. Okay. You're
You
upgrading the
still need to
tool
know somebody,
itself.
you still need to have a person who knows
Yeah.
that, it's a screw and not a nail.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they are similar looking. There you go. But and so, I'm sure you've spent quite a lot of time thinking about authenticity as well, and authentication of
Yes.
content. And let's go into that a bit. I know I have some friends here in the audience who spend quite about a lot of time on this subject and provenance and our rights with our data and
Yes.
things that really matter. So let's talk about that for a bit. And so what are you seeing right now?
It's a hot mess.
Yeah.
Um, that's the short take, is that it's a hot mess. Look, right now, if you post it online, it's not going to be yours anymore. That's the
Right,
long and
right.
short of it. The
Uh-huh.
minute you post it online, somebody somewhere is scraping it into something. I
Yeah.
hold 8 different copyrights on AI and ethics. None
Mm-hmm.
of them are on my website. Because
Mm.
the minute I put them on my website, even
Yeah.
though I have copyright protection, and I'm going to sue everybody that scrapes it, they won't even let me prove that it's even in their data set, even though I know it's in their data set, even if it copies me verbatim.
Mm-hmm.
People are still struggling to win cases that even look like that.
Yeah.
Because what they're saying, and this is where it gets really wild, in order to make an AI system more accurate, generally a more limited data set with less contradictions would be helpful for getting more accurate answers. However, judge actually provided dicta from the bench probably about a year ago in one of the copyright cases. And he had mentioned, in a data set that big, couldn't there be 2 almost identical things without the other people ever knowing it?
Mm-hmm.
So how do we know it was your thing that is the original work that these other things are derivatives of, and not that one, and they're not the one in front of my court? By the way, I'm paraphrasing here. I don't have it open in front
Mm-hmm.
of me. Long story short, the takeaway from that was larger data sets shield you from responsibility or accountability
Mm-hmm.
or against claims of ownership by others. There is nothing online that can't be scraped somehow. They will find a way and they will do it. It used to be they could take words, but not images. Now they can take images too. And by the way, the arguments against images are kind of pretty lame.
Mm-hmm.
If they can identify a street light, a light bulb, and an eyeball, they could recognize a C with a circle around it, copyright
Mm-hmm.
symbol, and
Yeah.
automatically reject those from their data set. But
Mm-hmm.
notice nobody's putting forth that as a solution.
Right. Right.
So
Mm-hmm.
your images, I'm a photographer. You might notice some cameras.
Oh yeah. I have a
Okay.
brownie over here on my shelf too.
Yeah, these are
Yeah.
my grandfathers, so they're all vintage. I know how
Oh
they work.
wow.
Fun
Uh,
times. But your images are not safe. Your
no.
words are not safe. Your logos are not safe. Your pillars are not safe. Your mission is not safe. Your vision is not safe. Everything that makes you you can be scraped for anything else. And
Mm-hmm.
right now, the way that our law is situated and stated is if it's for training purposes, they're allowed to do whatever they want. Now, the weird thing is for AI, I haven't seen this argument in physical form yet, although it's been conceptualized. It's that can you argue that the end result is that it's not actually being used for training, but it's used for the product?
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't seen someone make that argument. But right now, when it comes to ownership of information, of content, of all of it, you have none.
Yeah.
And I
Right.
think the sooner we make peace with that, not necessarily roll over and accept it, but really understand that at our core,
Mm-hmm.
the more that we'll be able to understand just what happened. Because while it might be cool that we can talk to computers, sometimes where your attention is drawn is away from the things that matter that you should actually be paying attention to.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Right.
fact that we all lost our ownership to anything we've produced online, with the first website I think went up in 91.
Mm-hmm.
Everything we've produced since 1991 no longer belongs to you. Even if
Yeah.
you're not old enough for that to be relevant, just think about that in context.
Mm-hmm.
It is now available to anyone who has the desire to scrape it for training purposes.
Right. Exactly. And
So,
a good friend of mine, Reza Rasul over at Quai AI,
mhm,
He said models should provide the provenance records for their entire training set. Just a
Yes,
topic of conversation that we often bring up over in our meetings there. But
yes.
yeah, provenance is important. And
Yeah, they'll probably respond to the internet
yeah.
because it can be from anywhere on
Mm-hmm.
it. Yes, another comment. They're unnecessarily bloated with general knowledge. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
guys, they use Reddit threads and TikTok conversations in data sets because
Oh yeah.
they were working on it, learning to converse, to talk.
Uh-huh.
That's why it's a conversational
Right.
model.
Yeah. It makes it modern, but it doesn't make it give it the classical spine that it ought to have. And I've had conversations where so I do a fair amount of testing. I mean, a lot, and on multiple computers at the same time with various large language models. Okay, at home, and I have
Mhm.
found some that bottom out and turn into a. I was having this great conversation, probably about biomimetics or something like that, with the AI. It was one of the llama variants. I think it was gradient, which is something that's very large context window capable and kind of crazy but fun. And it bottomed out on me, and it turned into a fever dream where I was having a conversation with it through the guise of it being a professor's emails to someone else at a university. And I looked them up and I was like, wow, this is a person. I had a weird conversation with them sideways because it related to everything I was asking it. And so it started coughing up emails to this other person. And I got probably 20 interchanges out of it
Okay.
and was completely blown away. And but I've seen it go the other way where it is the chat rooms, it is the forums, and is
Yes.
those conversations, and you can plainly see it was trained like that, and you can see it being flippant or having a propensity in one way or another,
Yes.
or just a informality to it, which is fine, which is a study into itself, but is flies against everything else before it too, if that's all you have. So it's, again, the same one that sounds really good that you pay for at OpenAI, you pay top dollar for, is wrong, sometimes. And it will say, not everything's accurate here, but it will sound so right, and so correct. And then a lot of times you can look it up and it is, and every once in a while it's not, depending,
Well, I think there's an important philosophy
you know?
lesson in this, and I'll keep it simple. But in philosophy and logic, what we would say is it gives you an answer that's plausible.
Mm-hmm.
It's plausible. It's one of many plausible answers. It does not mean it's right. How do you know it's right? You check to make sure that it's not wrong. And when we
Mm-hmm.
discuss knowledge in philosophy, we talk about knowledge being tied to the truth. If you don't know what the truth is, or you don't know that something isn't true, you don't have knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And since it can only give you one of many plausible answers, it's really dangerous to say that the model knows something. The model
Mm-hmm.
doesn't know it. The model thinks it's possible that this is the
Mm-hmm.
answer you're looking for. Kind of like these may be the droids or may not be the droids we're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah.
This may
Yeah.
or may not be the answer that you're
Mm-hmm.
looking for. And
Mm-hmm.
as Reza in the comments pointed out, yes, slimmer LMs or RAG with RAG,
Mm-hmm.
definitely
Mm-hmm.
informed by your own data, making
Mm-hmm.
personal AI is a much better solution, even if
Mm-hmm.
it's your business AI.
Yeah.
Narrowing the data sets
Mm-hmm.
is going to be better
Yeah.
for most
Mm-hmm.
people. You do
Yeah.
not need every conflicting idea ever presented on the internet to
Uh-huh.
come to your simple query.
Right. The small language model is definitely that. And so we usually use an LLM, which is a large language model. But the 8 billion version or 7B version of a llama
Yes,
is going to do a different type of job. And it is less, and would be more accountability for those who
yes, there
build it
will,
at that point, like you
especially
said.
for ownership.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And so that's what we work with a lot at home, are these small language models. And it's interesting. There are advantages to the large ones where they've taken and they'll make a slimmed down version that's specialized just for coding. Okay. But really good at coding, they say. And I'll test all these things next to one another. And it's the large language model that still comes out on top without being, fine tuned for that.
Mhm.
Um, and there's just it's counterintuitive at a point,
Yeah.
and that changes too. All this will become clear, but all this is growing so quickly, and we're learning it as a global society, like beyond our choice. We're exposed to this now, and we have to think about some of these things. Not everybody, but if you're in business, you're forced to think about it. Maybe you're not even involved in tech and you have to think about it now. Or maybe you love it because it's helping you with all these other things that are in your job that may or may not be tech related. So
Here's an interesting complication.
Mhm.
57% of the content being published online right now is generated.
Yeah.
Now, as that generated content gets scraped and scooped back up, we are looking at potentially diminishing returns.
Hmm.
There's less authentic language, there's less authentic speak, there's less new ideas. Everything becomes a reinforcement loop. You
Hmm.
know, we have created something amazing in a computer that we can talk to, but we've also created some pretty amazing challenges. And even right now, I can promise you that there are publishers that are interested in putting their authors' voices
Hmm.
into LLMs and then giving their readers the rights to search the LLM for answers. But what
Hmm.
happens to the authors under those circumstances too? Because
Hmm.
then your information was just used for training.
I've seen a lot of really cool deals out there, just like you would a record deal. Okay.
Right?
And I work in art and entertainment media and been a performer my whole life and worked with a lot of legends. And I can say from all sides of the fence that I really love a lot of aspects of this technology. Can make some really cool things happen that are very useful. And I've seen a lot of artists who are by hand painters, non-digital. Well, they become digital later, but they are truly classically trained. Embrace every drop of this technology and utilize it. Before a lot of the generative AI was out in the last few years, they were using things like Blender and other 3D rendering environments to take their art and build it on meshes and like do all this hard work and create animations. And I have a lot of by hand artist friends that embrace this technology wholeheartedly, and including myself. And I've trained it on my own art and got it to replicate my style, this particular style I did with pastels. And it did a wonderful job. And then I turned that out and showed people, like, look how good it did, and look at where the limits were, but look at what I got right. And there's a person who's really amazing. His name is Chris Doe, and he has the Future. It's a podcast. This is wonderful, and he helps designers and people who work in the arts industry get paid what they're worth. And they came up with this idea to make a Chris Doe bot that would be a video representation of him that could give these presentations and speeches because he speaks so often. And they built one, and he said that they let a lot of people try it out, and they were like, it brought me to tears, and in a good way. He was like, well, that doesn't sound like me. You did a really great job. And then it was like really compassionate, where he usually is a little cold, right? So he found that to be like really amazing and interesting. And then his own bot affected himself when he was having a deep conversation with it. So there's a flip to all this. It's really positive and cool. And would I sell, if I was a voice actor, would I be interested in selling my voice? Or it's like celebrity voices. Think about your
There's a
GPS.
scandal about that.
Yeah, there's all yeah, exactly. Goodness. So there's all these cool avenues and opportunities where it just makes sense and it would be cool and acceptable. I get it. There's some commerciality to some of this stuff. Whereas you don't want to take away, the true human connection there, right? So
What can I
that
say?
there's a
When the bot's done giving its talk,
uh-huh.
there's nothing behind it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like you haven't formed a personal connection. You
Mm,
talk to their bot. They don't know who you were. They don't recognize you from the audience. They don't
right.
recognize you as someone who made a comment.
Hmm.
Like none of that stuff is there. And honestly, as a photographer, I have finished photographs.
Hmm.
Any cameras there or whatever. I did graphic design for a decade.
Yeah.
I used Photoshop and Illustrator and all sorts of fun stuff.
Right.
Um, Back in the day, I've even done manual color separation. I've had all sorts of fun.
Yeah.
I don't use Photoshop in my photography, and I never have. It's always been a line I've refused to cross.
Yeah.
Um, I've seen some ethicists who are like, "Oh, kind of cool. They made an AI bot of me." No desire to have an AI bot of me. If you want me, I'm
Hmm.
generally fairly accessible. Come find me. By the way, I'm on
Right.
LinkedIn. Feel free.
Uh-huh.
I answer DMs. Have fun. Um, but It
Yeah.
really does cut off, not necessarily using Photoshop, but having bots and stuff really does cut us off from each other. They actually, I was reading a list of like top 10 jobs, like AI jobs you could do from home. And one of them was a communications specialist, a human communications specialist. For all of the human facing skills, we'll lose.
Wow.
And you know what? That just kind of made me go, whoa. Because, if I can't imagine a silent world. Now I talk way too much about
Right.
them, but hey, I just said I talked way too much. You're like, yeah. I'm like, hey, wait a minute.
With that.
But I can't imagine a quiet world. I mean, we saw how COVID felt. Most
Mhm.
of us wanted to get out of our houses, wanted to get back to our friends, wanted to see people. Not, I mean, we love our families, but we did miss, there were parts, those interactive parts of our world.
Mhm. Yeah.
How is this going to help with that?
Yeah. Our daily lives are the scaffolding of our inner lives too. I mean, all of this is so important, for the human experience and for health. I mean, you
Yeah, we
know,
got deep. Sorry.
this is this is all really important. And for people who where this works and makes sense, again, I like to focus on too, because it's worth aiming at. So in education, and people we know, we have a friend, Bruce Schneier, who's a Harvard professor and a security specialist, and he is and Reza would probably want to add to this. I'd like to have him mention what he is doing. Oh yeah, he's dropped the email in there. Okay, let's see if I can bring Reza up for a second and talk about this, because we're taking data and giving it to a bot that ultimately represents the professor. Um, let's see. Reza, can you hear me there?
Yeah,
Let's
I'm
see.
I'm
There we
here.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the point here was to have you use a small language model to integrate into your own knowledge and not use its built-in knowledge. And so, Reza, let's talk for a moment about how we've approached this for Bruce.
Right. So when Bruce first saw our proof of concept of personal AI, so personal AI in the context of Quai is taking a small language model, one that can run locally, ignoring the general knowledge, the bloatware that I disparagingly call it, and tell the user to bring their own knowledge along. And that knowledge allows them now to just use the small language model for its linguistic capability, and they can have a conversation with their own knowledge. That on its own is empowering.
Mhm.
In the educational use cases, we arm the professor with that chatbot and allow them to release that to their students. So
Mhm.
that gives them a superpower.
Yeah.
Whether it's in the case of Bruce Schneier, he loaded it up with his 14 textbooks and a collection of his essays. Now his students can have a conversation with that body of knowledge and even query it on issues that he did not express an opinion of. It'll glean that from the knowledge. So the technology is called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. It's
Mhm.
kind of in its early days. It's
Wow.
really simplistic. It's like looking at um, a painting through a keyhole. You can see
Mhm.
all the keyhole sizes, but you can't step back and actually get a higher level understanding and appreciation of the entire context in one. So we're augmenting that with graph database technology. So
Mhm.
graph RAG allows you to step back and see the context of data at different levels of resolution
Mhm.
and solve some of those problems like being able to count. RAG
Yeah.
can't count. Well, and nor could LLMs. They can't count.
Mhm.
You can't ask it a question which would require a high level appreciation of the entire context. You can ask them a question, RAG a question for where the answer is explicitly mentioned as a sentence or a paragraph in the context. But anyway, that's the avenue of research that we're going along in our nonprofit AI lab. And we firmly feel that if AI is going to be truly uplifting for humanity, let's start solving the problems of humans first. Let's arm individuals with AI that they can run locally and where they bring their own knowledge along, not the current topology. Doc Searles is one of the officers at Quai. He says that AI is currently in the sort of mainframe era of computing.
Yeah.
And it's waiting for the personal computing revolution to come along. And hopefully we're accelerating that. And of course, if you think about that mainframe era, there were service providers that said, hey, come and run your payroll jobs on our mainframe computer. And it was very much their motivation was to keep you hooked into their service. So that's why LLMs are unnecessarily bloated. They're bloated in order to force them to only run in the cloud. And that keeps you sticky. That keeps you paying your $19.99 subscription every month.
Or 2000.
Yeah.
Sorry.
For data, that is really your data. They actually, it's the same. They're playing from the same playbook they did for centuries, like Disney did. Disney basically harvested the commonwealth of literature and took writing that was out of copyright, Grimm's Fairy Tales, that was available free to everyone, and they put their own brand on it. And they said, oh, no, this is now our copyright. And in fact, they got the copyright laws changed. Yes. If you see who were the lobbyists that mounted a campaign of regulatory capture, this is the same damn thing they're doing now. Regulatory capture. Oh, no, now the half a dozen companies that form the oligopoly that control AI now are lobbying for regulation to basically stop competitors from competing with them. Anyway, look, if I fall off my soapbox and break my ankle, I would. It's worth trying bruce.quai.ai, which is the link we put up.
Oh yeah, that's right.
It's a POC. It allows you to ask questions of Bruce Schneier. And he said, I don't want my bot to have a face. He says, AI is not your friend. At best, it's a useful tool. So we remove the talking head from it. But anyway, stop me now, Daniel.
I appreciate you coming up and sharing all of that, Reza. It's really, it's exciting. And we've been friends for quite a while now. And Reza used to be living. We're almost neighbors. He's in California now, but he used to work he was the retired CTO of the Real Networks here, Paul Allen's company here in Seattle. So, but yeah, we've seen a lot. So anyway, thank you, Reza. I really appreciate you sharing that. It really matters to see where it works, and for someone out there, especially a security specialist, and just mastermind that Bruce is, to have very particular, demand for this and exactly where it fits in, where it makes sense. And I think it's beautiful. I think, like we had talked about before, here's a whole, here's 3 months worth, there's a quarter of work, here's the curriculum. And then when the next, quarter runs around, I'm going to change all that data out and give it the new stuff. Now my students can talk about what's next. Right. There are all these different options. But anyway, again, thank you, Reza.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, I'll see you next Friday in the meeting there. All right. But anyway, but as you see, Laura, there's a lot of people working on the grassroots end of this, and are bridging out to the companies and universities and schools. And we're talking about infrastructure, public, the Internet of Things here, public edge devices, like a municipal source of compute in a general area. And that's what it takes, in some cases, the whole library approach of seeing it as this community center, and who knows what the library of the future might have. If actually physical localized compute becomes more widely adopted and available, it's decentralized, and it's lower power usage also in some cases can make it very attractive and make some projects possible altogether. But anyways, back to the knowledge though. Do you yourself find yourself coming up with a way that you would use AI to help your efforts? I mean, AI for AI's sake. I mean, when it comes to ethics work, are you creating or finding any tools that are helping you delineate, between things, or find new avenues of approach?
It gets interesting. There
Yeah.
are tools out there that are positioned and promise to help you generate reports, identify problems. It can, test the results of your model and see if the results conform to what the expectations are. But to be frank, and it's probably because of my background and the fact that I come from philosophy, I'm a tech ethicist who's an ethicist first, tech second. That does not mean I don't know tech or that I don't understand it. What it means is I fell in love with philosophy first. My degrees are in philosophy and ethics, not in technology. What I've been running into, if I use LLMs and I look up information relating to the work that I do, is they're very much giving me the status quo. I ask about ethics, it tells me about data. I ask about ethics and it tells me about chief technology officers. I ask about ethics and it tells me more about data and bias. Because it's scraped on the existing information that is out there, its ethical guidance and understanding is the ethical understanding that is mainstream right now, which isn't really the philosophical kind. A lot of the people that are working in tech ethics right now have incredible skills, amazing resumes, they've accomplished tons, and they're doing ethics by extension. In other words, they might be data specialists who are used to bias. And so they get asked the tricky questions that come up about, well, bias, data, how to create a solid data set, how to get bias out of the data set. Can't completely get rid of it, but how can we manage it? Those kinds of things. I don't ask those kinds of questions when I'm doing ethical work in technology. I'm looking at impacts on marginalized group. I'm doing the intersection of climate with technology and AI consumption. I'm putting together concerns with bias, with concerns of developing nations, with concerns of environmental ethics, and rolling them together. Those conversations don't appear to have made it very far into the data set. So by and large, for my work and even my students, they're not getting good answers from AI. I asked them about Nozick and to write a paper on it, and they start telling me about Nozick's political theory instead of his theory of knowledge I asked about.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, philosophers write on multiple topics. I write on AI, and I write on adaptive preference and the way that marginalized communities make choices. If you ask about Laura Miller, AI ethicist, and you were looking for my AI work, and it starts talking to you about how people make choices, next thing you know, you write an essay that says Laura Miller believes that AI makes choices using adaptive preference. None of that is accurate.
Not true. Right. Exactly.
I mean, I asked it about me, and I asked it for my bio at one point in time, and it told me I was a Nobel laureate. So I'm very pleased with that.
It rolled the dice.
But also because for my own work, even with NextGen, the way that I approach tech ethics is so different from people who fell in love with technology and want it to do good versus someone who understands what's good and not good and then wants to see technology do it, that it really can't help me with my work. Can it help me with marketing for NextGen? Sure. Can it help me choose between two logos or colors of logos? Sure.
Easy.
Mission, vision? Yeah. Can it help me with an idea like a tripartite theory of intersectional communications between developers, deployers, and users? No.
Right.
Why? Because people aren't talking about it that way, because the
Yeah.
people doing ethics aren't
Uh-huh.
ethicists.
So you have to train it yourself right then and there, and not necessarily technically the training, but you are feeding it, this context and the
Well, I
content.
don't really use it much for my
Yeah.
content, because once I do, it's gone. And I know
Yeah.
that too. Even if your history's turned off, it's not that your stuff isn't being read. So even
Right.
I'm using it for the much more basic foundational stuff. You
Mhm.
know, does this seem like an intriguing, a catcher your attention kind of, tagline,
Yeah.
is this paragraph clear if you were reading it from this perspective? Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm using it very much for those kinds of things. I
Yeah.
might occasionally check in and be like, what are the top 10 issues across, a subject matter for AI, just to see how up to date it is. But
Mhm.
no, generally when I'm doing my work, I guess because, I had some people have called me a thought leader. I don't think of myself that way. I just nerd
Mhm.
out and do me. Um, but because I talk about stuff differently, I don't find the information that it gives me as helpful, unless I'm trying to draw a contrast between how I talk about it and how other people talk
Yeah.
about it. That
Yeah.
can come in handy.
This is important. This is such an important distinction for people to understand. And yeah, you really hit it on the head. Um, it's expertise. And within that, I mean, this is why people make the more, they'll make the smaller language model, but they'll make it specialized into something, and it can be really good in that way. And so for you, there's, for to use it as a tool, as an extension of your expertise, would be a different effort altogether than using it to help fill in the gaps for these different things. What do you think about that? Which logo is more streamlined? Whatever. For whatever it's worth, the calculator won't tell you if the house looks good, but it sure will tell you if it measures out. You know what I mean? The
Yeah,
calculator
it'll tell me how it
but it's,
measures up or fits to
yeah,
the current world.
yeah,
It can't help me break the rules of the
it's,
existing world.
yeah, it's not a style guide. It's
Yeah.
so in that, I mean, these tools are, with all limits, also are going to have, again, it sounds convincing, and it's going to come up with an answer for whatever question you have. Rarely do they say, I don't know. You know what I mean? It's usually always something that's, it makes you think it knows. Anyway, so, let's see what else. So right now, do you feel like you have some next steps laid out for yourself that you are aiming at in terms of what's next to connect,
Mhm.
or what you, or maybe even the idea of helping companies with regulation and bringing the right choices in with their own concerns here through
Um,
your ethical expertise? I mean, what? Go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, look, the whole clue to all of this is figuring out what the right and good thing is to do. You're not going to be able to wield this technology without running into a question. Not only can I do this, but should I do this? The ultimate, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Mm,
But we really have to start thinking about what's in our collective best interest, what's in our best interest overall, and what we want the future to look like. Because what is often not mentioned is we have not only created the AI,
mhm,
but it's using us as its training, as its learning. Almost as though there's a toddler peeking around the corner wondering if we're saying naughty words.
mhm,
We are its teacher. We are its education. We are the knowledge that it has. We are the insight that it is capable of. Our
mhm,
limits and our faulty, or our ability to fault or to be incorrect. I'm looking for a word I can't find in my head.
mhm,
All of those things.
mhm.
AI can become the best of us
That's right. That's right.
or the worst of us.
It's just as fallible in
It,
that
it's
sense.
it's it's just as valuable, but in addition, it's kind of
Mhm.
like having parents with a toddler. We already kind of brought it into existence with a predisposition,
Yeah.
and that predisposition isn't predisposed to good. We've
Mhm.
bypassed ethics at every
Mhm.
turn. We are
Yeah.
still tackling race. We are still tackling violence against women. We are still
Mhm.
tackling allocation of resources. We are still
Yeah.
tackling much we want finances to influence our lives, our worlds, our decisions, our governments, our politics, our everything.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're essentially raising a childlike version of us and wanting it to do all of the good things and none of the not good things that it already knows exist.
Right.
So, like any good, responsible adult, we need to clean up our language.
Mm-hmm.
We need to remember that there are little ears listening.
Mm-hmm.
We need to recognize that everything that we do has an audience. And we
Yeah.
need to act like we are driving this because we are. I know it doesn't seem like it. I know it seems like
That's
it's
right.
tech companies and it seems like it's this other
Uh-huh.
big business or this industry or whatever, but they're literally using every single thing that we've done
Mm-hmm.
and are downloading it into this entity
Mm-hmm.
and then saying, now make all the good choices, even though we've given you all of the worst of us.
Mm-hmm.
So if we want to turn this tide, if we want to turn it around, if we want to be treated fairly in the world, we have to start treating each other fairly in the world. We have to watch what we say online. We have to narrow down or calm down some of those internet fights. We need to watch the language that we use. We have to pay attention to racism. We have to call it out where it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's time for us to clean up our act if we want technology to help us clean up our act. It literally can't do otherwise if we don't give it the information it needs to do otherwise. As long as the data sets keep reinforcing what we've already done and we don't change course, it can't change course.
No, not at all.
Teachers, trainers, data set, reinforcers, objectors, those are all roles that we hold. They couldn't make this technology without us. They couldn't make this technology without the thoughts that we've shared, the views that we hold, and all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
It's time that we as a society figured out how to do the good and the right thing, whether or not the law, and this will sound completely backwards, whether the law can keep up with AI or not, ethics always can. Ethics isn't behind. The laws are behind. The other thought that's behind are the people waiting for the laws to say we can't do anything good until the laws appear. You can do all the good you want. You don't need a law to tell you to be good.
No.
You need a law to tell you where the bad stuff starts.
That's right. That's right.
So goals for NextGen and I moving forward. I would like to speak in the global south, which we don't generally call so much that anymore. I prefer not to call it that way, but I'd like to talk more in developing nations and nations that aren't gaining the attention that they should for the right reasons for AI and technology. I would like the solution that I've been developing for social media to be brought into the world, and we are actively seeking funding for it right now, because with half the world experiencing a mental health crisis, well, that's certainly not the good. And it's our obligation to help others when we see that kind of suffering. So I'd like to see that move forward. I'm definitely interested in getting more into the actual decisions being made in AI and to have more involvement at a higher level, even across government or think tanks and organizations really looking to challenge the status quo. So NextGen does have, certainly has for me dreams and goals, but I don't consider any day that's wasted. I'm an advisor on an intergroup that focuses on being trauma informed.
Right.
I'm an advisor on the Open Voice Network in partnership with the Linux Foundation.
Nice.
I search all of my roles and look at every day as an opportunity because I don't need an invitation to do good.
Yeah. It's like that feeling. It's like I said the other day, no one's paying me to do what I do, but no one's stopping me either. And I just keep going, and I get to affect change on my terms and where it means the most to me and where I can make an impact. So it's empowering. It's an opportunity to change things around you. This isn't about policing your behavior. Okay. This is about being a better person. This isn't about watch what you say online. How about don't think like that? Grow up.
And even if you think like that, it would still help us if you didn't write like that.
Yeah.
Because it'll end up in the data set. While you work on changing your mindset, you can do the superficial things until that superficial stuff becomes authentic. It's how you learn to do it. If you moderate your words when you're online and you're like, okay, that doesn't sound so good, I'll clean that up a little bit. The next time you go to say it or you go to act on that, you'll remember I had to clean that up online because it didn't sound so good. Maybe it's actually
Yeah.
not so good. Those two
Mhm.
things can work in partnership. But what we
Yes.
really need from each other
Mhm.
is the best from each other.
Mhm.
That solves so many of our problems. If we just woke up tomorrow and thought, you know what, I'm just going to do one thing differently than I did yesterday,
Right.
we'd
Right.
have 8 billion people
Mhm.
doing one good thing a day.
Yeah. I know, and it's just even if you did something neutral and different, it would be a change. Bro, if you're right-handed, brush your teeth with your left hand. It makes you think differently. Just go out of your way to do something slightly off that's positive, and you never know what you're going to get. And that's everyday living. But on the large, there's a lot of expertise out there to be discovered, and a lot of people's perspectives and feelings on this to come to light. I can't help but feel like that you are able to act as a shepherd for companies and groups, where they really need to kind of like get their ethics and regulation together, policies and what they need to do to meet certain requirements, but also where and how to make that change or where to make those decisions is really it's its own expertise, it's its own
Yeah.
world, that in which I feel like you are a rare creature out there, and that very few people I have ever met have this expertise in the way you do, and your heart is in it. And how could it not be? It's the nature of that work. Okay. It would be like it's like not liking music and being a great musician. It just wouldn't make sense. Um, but you've got some great points today with just coming with our best. I like that. And bringing that to the training you know, and just being aware that these are limited guessing machines at best, and that it will improve with our guidance and our interaction. It will not improve without it. It will not. There's nothing guaranteed in any of this. Even with the best of intents, there's nothing that's going to be guaranteed. It's going to take a lot of work, but yeah, we are in it together. There's a lot to do from here. So, is there any final messages here you'd like to bestow upon everyone before we head out? Anything you'd like to share?
I think it's just kind of mentioning more clearly something that I had said, which it keeps me company. Yesterday was a hard day for me.
Okay.
Yesterday, I had an interesting conversation about the future of education, whether or not there's values and things like PhD degrees and advanced knowledge and how it's respected in the world. And I walked from that into a funny class about whether or not we can actually know what's physical. It was a little out
Hmm.
there,
Right.
but my intro students had a blast. And then I walked into environmental ethics and taught about um, biological weapons and the harm that they've caused in societies and the dangers in cleaning them up. And
Hmm.
then I came home, I did a little work on my business, and then came across a post about a woman who'd been brutally murdered
Hmm.
and another list of women who'd been brutally murdered.
I saw that. I read that. I read your post.
Yeah. And you know what? Doing ethics is that. You know, doing ethics involves looking at the worst of society and then trying to figure out what it would be involved in making it different or changing it. It's not looking at the ideal scenario. There are no rose-colored glasses. They were broken long ago. I have, if anything, X-ray vision and super clarity in a lot of areas that are very disturbing.
Yeah.
And I study it on the regular. And it's very easy for people tackling the not good stuff to feel it way down on you. And
Hmm.
to even look at our world and feel it way down on us. Right now, the United States is getting to go through a very contentious political election cycle on top of the everyday horrors that I, as an ethicist, study. It can be a lot. The one thing that I tell people, because they're like, like, does it ever make you depressed? Do you get sad? Like, what do you do with it? And you know what? There are hard days. But what
Yeah.
I remember and what keeps me company every single day as I look at the world changing and wondering how my sons will navigate it, and even the students that are in my classes, you are 100% in charge of the good stuff.
That's right.
The good stuff and the not good stuff. Well, the universe kind of hand delivers that on a platter. We don't really get to sidestep
Yeah.
the hard stuff. The hard stuff's going to appear when it appears.
That's
But
right.
we are absolutely in charge of the good stuff.
Yes.
So every single opportunity that you have, you
Mhm.
should be throwing as much good stuff out there as you can, while the opportunity is there for you to do that. You know,
Mhm.
there's a great quote by Mr. Rogers, if you remember Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Yeah.
They interviewed him, and he said,
Oh,
you know,
wow.
look for the helpers. I believe that was
That's
advice his
right.
mom gave him,
Uh-huh.
was
Right.
look for the helpers.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to AI, when it comes to technology, when it comes to on topic AI and even defense, AI and tracking of immigrant children,
Mm-hmm.
which is also something that has been floated and was actually engaged in by our government. When
Mm-hmm.
you see those things, the more you see that stuff, the more you throw out the good stuff, the more you throw the good stuff into the world, the more good you respond to it with. You can become one of the helpers. It
Right.
doesn't cost you anything. As a matter of fact, it'll add a great deal to
Mhm.
continue
Yeah.
to, I have an opportunity here and I can do good with it.
Mm-hmm.
So as we navigate these changes, if you're worried about your job, if you're worried about what the world is going to look like, if you're uncertain of political changes, if you don't know what the heck is going on and you're convinced nobody else knows what's going on too, you can still walk out your door and do the good stuff.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Don't lose sight of that. The
Mm-hmm.
hard stuff, well, we're just going to go through it. No, I'm working on it too. So I'll be riding shotgun with you. Just kind of picture me drinking snacks. I'll be, I'll be in the passenger seat,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
hitting the invisible gas and brake as needed. Um, but don't hesitate to get in the car,
That's right.
and don't forget that good things can happen on that road trip too.
Mm-hmm.
And you're in
Absolutely.
charge of them. So take the
Uh-huh.
naps, get the
Uh-huh.
snacks, go visit the world's tallest whatever. Go find the biggest ball of string on that little road trip that happens to be off a red stop. And make sure that you remember that this is all worth it.
Yeah, exactly. That is the key. That is the reason we get up. So awesome. Yeah. Well, I tell you what, it's been a pleasure having you. Got a lot to think about going forward. And this year is going to be, I tell you, there's going to be a lot unfolding, especially with recent regulations and rules around the world here. So a lot to keep up with. But
So regulation built to the strict. Find the strictest regulation that applies to what you're working on and build towards that. Then as new regulations come out, just see if it's any more strict than the last thing you built to. If it's not, your work is done. It will
yeah,
keep you from chasing regulations around the world.
I like that. That's a wonderful perspective. So again, thank you so much. You have a wonderful
Thank you.
day. This has been Dan Wilson with the AI Think Tank podcast, Laura Miller with NextGen Ethics. Everybody out there, have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you so much.